Well, maybe you've made this statement before, or maybe somebody's made it to you. I'm not a control freak, but let me show you how to do this. Or someone might say, you know what, as long as everything is going my way, I'm 100% flexible. Controlling life is one of those things that we learn really early on, that we don't have any control in life. That we can't completely control everything around us, right? How many people realize that, you know what, there's some things I just can't control at all? Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't mean there's no responsibility on our part, that we don't make choices that have consequences that matter. But it means that there is a lot of life that just absolutely we're not in control of. Do you realize that we actually willingly spend money, and in some cases spend a lot of money to experience a lack of control? I mean, that's what Disneyland's all about, right? Now, there is some responsibility there. We don't necessarily have to go there. But Disneyland is a way that we spend money to get on something that we don't control. Someone else controls this for us, and we actually enjoy it. It's pleasurable to us. We think this is great, this ride, or, the teacups. We're not in control of those. We may spin that, but that thing is moving around super fast, okay? Someone else is controlling that. And we had recently gone to Disneyland. We had not been there for, I want to say at least a year and a half. It's been a while. And so we went back, and some things have changed. One of the things that's changed is that the Tower of Terror is now the Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, see, people are upset. How many people have ridden the Guardians of the Galaxy? Anybody in here? All right, a few. How many people have ridden the Tower of Terror before? All right, well, it doesn't matter. It's a death trap no matter what you call it. All right, you can call it rainbows and kittens, and it's still terrifying to me. I'm not a fan of, being taken up real high and then just like dropped down to earth. It goes to 39 miles an hour, and you will go on a drop about 131 feet. And it's terrifying, this elevator, okay? My wife loves it. It's her favorite ride. We started out this last Tuesday. That's the first thing we rode. And then we bookended it. At the end of the day, it's the last thing that we rode. And every single time, I'm just like, and it's because, it does something to your stomach. It's terrifying what it does to your stomach. I mean, it's just like, I'm not ready for this, type of a feeling. And the thing about the ride, the premise of it as the Guardians of the Galaxy, is that a raccoon is in control of this. I don't want a raccoon to be in control of anything in my life, all right? Not even opening a box of Cheez-Its for me. I don't want a raccoon to be in control. But the idea of the ride is that this raccoon is in control. There's a lot of trust you and I put in these rides. We're trusting the engineers that came up with the ride, that they've designed everything, they've thought everything through. And we're going to willingly put ourselves on this elevator of doom. And we're also putting a lot of trust in the high school student or the former high school student who's making sure that we have ourselves buckled in and that he's going to hit the buttons right. There's a lot of trust there that we're putting. I grew up going to the Orange Show, okay, and riding those rides. And going across the street at Highland Avenue to the old Spirit baseball stadium, they used to have like a little carnival or fair they would put up there. The older you get, you'll never go on those rides again. When you set something up in about an hour or two, I'm not riding it. I'm sorry. There's no blue paint on the bolts where I'm seeing if anything's been messed with here or tinkered with. We realize eventually in life that we are not in full control. That life does seem, at times to us, I don't have any control of this. From the news to our Facebook to Instagram, you name it, we look around and we realize there's just a lot of life that's out of control. Well, how do you live? How do you live and function when life around you seems out of control? Well, Solomon, one of the wisest men, the wisest man to ever walk the planet, has news for us about how to live in a world when it's out of control. Because Solomon is the wisest guy that ever lived. He was one of the great kings of Israel. His father was King David. Solomon is the king who was able to build the temple for God and for Israel to come and worship there. And God called to Solomon and said, what do you want me to give you? And he could have named anything. He could have said, I want to be the wealthiest man. I want to be the most famous king. But what Solomon said is that I want to be the wisest. And God honored that and made him the wisest man who ever walked the planet. Nobody will ever have as much wisdom as Solomon. And in Solomon's wisdom, God inspired him to write the book of Proverbs, which he probably wrote around in mid-age. He also wrote the Songs of Solomon, and he also wrote a great book called Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes, though, when you read Ecclesiastes, you begin to get this image of Solomon being this grumpy old man who's sour on life. He's now old in age, and he writes Ecclesiastes, but you realize that Solomon's actually not being grumpy. He's just being real about life. He's saying life is really short, and there's a lot that happens in life, and there's so much in life that you can't control. And he's going to give us some great wisdom on how to live a life when you find your world around you just can't be controlled by you. No matter how hard you try to be a control freak, you're not going to succeed because life can't be controlled. Sure, you have decisions you make and there's choices you make and you have to take responsibility, but there's a lot of life that just is not your responsibility. So how do you live in this world when it can't be controlled? Here's the first thing: move beyond your comfort zone. Solomon say, you know what, you want to get busy to live in now, you're going to have to live a life and realize that life can't just be lived in safety. You have to be able to move beyond your comfort zone. And Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 1 says, ship your grain across the sea, and after many days you may receive a return. I like how the Common English Bible says it. It says, just send your bread on the water, because in the course of time, you're going to find it again. What does it mean to send your bread upon the water? I mean, like literally put bread on water? Are you going to find that again? I mean, the water's going to destroy that bread? You're not going to fish the bread back out of the water. It's going to be gone. So what is Solomon meaning by this? Well, what he's saying is, in his day, farmers could take their grain that they received from their harvest, and they could either use that for themselves, maybe make a loaf of bread, and sure, the bread's going to last them for, let's say, a week. Or they could take that same grain and they could put it in barrels and put it on merchant ships and send it out on sea, and they could receive a greater return for that grain than what they could ever do in the safety of it being used by their own hands. Soon as you put the grain in barrels and put it on merchant ships, you know what happens? You choose to lose control of that. You're taking a risk. You don't know if there's going to be a storm that will sink the ships and now the grain's at the bottom of the ocean. You don't know if someone's going to rob the grain. You don't know if you go to another land and that, you know what, they just say, hey, we have plenty of grain. We're not going to buy any grain. And you don't get a great return from it. But the thing is, you're taking a risk. And God never called you and I to live life in the perfect comfort and safety. That doesn't mean God's saying, hey, be risky. You know, go throw yourself off the building and say, all right, God's going to catch me if I fall. God's not saying that. God's saying be bold, but also be wise. But understand that living for God doesn't mean that I completely live in a safe environment. That he wants me to take risk. He wants me to take good risk that have wisdom. I like how Rick Warren mentions it. He just says, God tells you to take a step of faith, but you hesitate to take it until he shows you what the second step will be. You're not waiting on God. He's waiting on you. If we're waiting for God to show us every single detail before we choose to take a risk, before we choose to be bold and be wise, we're not the ones waiting on God. God's the one that's waiting on us. Think about when Jesus walked on the water and Peter was in the boat. And Jesus comes up and Peter says, if it's you, tell me it's you and for me to come out to you. And Jesus says, come on out. Well, Peter has a choice to make. Either you're going to stay in the comfort of this boat with the rest of these guys, or you're going to hop over the rail and you're actually going to start walking on the water to Jesus. Jesus doesn't tell him and say, hey, when you get out on the water, take this step, take that step. He doesn't do any of that. He just says, come on out to me. And that's what God invites us to do. He says, hey, you want to live life on purpose? Sometimes it's going to require a risk. It's going to require being bold. It's going to require being wise. And you know what God guarantees us with? That he's going to take care of us. In Galatians 6, 9, and 10, it says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. He says, don't stop living for me and play it safe. Take a risk and live for me, because if you do, you're going to be rewarded for it. Doesn't mean you're going to get perfect health, you're going to become famous, you're going to have loads of money. It just means that, you know what? If I take a risk, I know God's going to be there with me. But if I just sit around and play it safe and not take advantage of the opportunities that God's given me, I'm not living the way God wants me to live. God wants me to be bold, and he wants me to be wise, and he will return. He will reward that. Number 2, understand that life is unpredictable. Why get outside of your comfort zone? Well, because life's unpredictable. You're never going to be able to predict life perfectly. Now, there's been attempts at this. In fact, in the 1900s, a German candy company had created these postcards trying to predict what life would be like in the 2000s. And one of the postcards was this. There's a police officer looking through an X-ray camera that's being able to see what's on the other side of the wall of these two guys trying to break into the door. Well, we don't have an X-ray camera. We know what we have? The Ring doorbell, right? The Ring doorbell shows us when people show up at our doors. Or we have surveillance cameras today. We have drones today. Now, they didn't predict that 100% accurately, but not too bad for the 1900s. Then there's a prediction of trains being able to have buildings on these rolling platforms, and they just take these buildings from one place to the next. They take your home from one place to the next. You know what we call that today? RVs. RVs, yeah. We see RVs all the time. We got RVs. You go right here on the 215, and it's RV heaven right there off of it, right? Loads of RVs. We also see that they predicted that a woman would be singing opera in one place, and then they would be able to broadcast it, into another place. So maybe the comfort of your own home, and you'd be able to hear it and you'd be able to see it. Well, that's not bad. We have television. At New Year's, we could be here in Southern California, and 3 hours before we celebrate the New Year, we could actually watch it being taken place in New York City at Times Square. And so we see broadcasting today. The thing is, we've been able at times to do our very best to anticipate some things, but we can never be 100% accurate on predicting. Think of how many failures we have. For instance, them telling the Beatles that they would never pan out. Or all the predictions that we see every year. This team's going to win the World Series, or this team's going to win the Super Bowl. And those things don't pan out how we predict them. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 11, 2 and 3, invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You don't know what disaster may come upon the land. If clouds are full of water, they'll pour rain on earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there it will lie. Solomon's saying in some instances, you can anticipate how things will turn out. He says, when the clouds came across Palestine, these thick clouds came in at this certain time of the year, they said, you know what, we know rain's coming. But he says on other occasions, you can't predict it, whether this tree falls to the north or it falls to the south, wherever it falls is going to lay there. You can't predict when the tree is going to fall. So some things you can anticipate, and some things you just absolutely cannot predict. Henry Nouwen, who's a great Christian author and a great Christian man, he just says, real enemies of our life are the oughts and the ifs. They pull us backward into the unalterable past and forward into the unpredictable future, but real life takes place in the here and the now. We can't worry about the past. We can't go back and change anything in the past. And we can't predict anything in the future. So the best solution is just to live right now. To live for the here and the now. Now, we experience this in our family, just even on a small level. We could never predict how long this dog would live. This is Jersey. She was our boxer for 10 years. Absolutely loved this boxer. What a wonderful pet we had. It was so hard. Some of you know this. You did this before I ever had to do this. My first time ever having to do this, we had to take her down to Loma Linda Hospital, and we had to put her to sleep. Her health had deteriorated. And some of you know how that feels. And at the time, I thought, this isn't going to be that hard. I didn't think it was going to be that hard. But then I had to carry her out of that truck, And I had to take her over and I had to hand her over, and she's looking at me as I'm leaving, and it was just super hard. We could never predict the day that this was going to happen. We never even thought about the day that this was going to happen. But it did, and we couldn't predict. I think it was 2 days before Jersey died or 2 days after she died, this puppy was born. And we could never predict that we would have Piper in our life and that she would bring us just as much joy as Jersey had brought us. And we absolutely love Piper. She's been a great addition to our family. The thing that Solomon's saying is this: you can't predict the good times that will take place in your life, and you can't predict the bad things that will take place in your life. So instead, you know what you can do? Don't waste time on worry. You can't predict when the good things will come, and you can't predict when the bad things will come. But don't waste time on worry, wondering when these things are going to happen. That's what Solomon would say. Don't waste your time on worry. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 4 and 5, he says, whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. You know what worry really is? Worry is trying to control the uncontrollable. I heard one pastor describe it this way: worry is actually like a rocking chair. There's a whole lot of movement and action going on in that rocking chair, but you haven't gone anywhere. You're still in the same place where you were. That's what worry does. Worry has all this action, all this stuff going on in our brain, all this stress taking place, but nothing's happening. There's nothing taking place. Worry doesn't do anything for us. You know, and I'm a person who has worried before. I'm not speaking just to you. I'm speaking to myself. I have a tendency to worry. I just don't show it outwardly. But I'll be stewing inside. Your worry is stewing, I've heard, and it's not doing. It's just stewing and it isn't doing. And you know what Solomon says there with Ecclesiastes 11 there when he talks about how the farmer is worrying? I'm going to watch for the wind. I will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. He's saying the person who sits around and waits for the perfect time to do something will be waiting for the rest of their life. That's what worry does. Worry causes you to sit and wait and not move. And he's saying if the farmer just waits for the perfect opportunity to do something, he's never going to do it. If you're just sitting and waiting for the perfect opportunity to move forward in life, to make a decision in life, you're never going to make the decision. You're just going to stay put. Worry is something that we shouldn't waste time on because there's a couple reasons. And these aren't in your notes, so you can write them down if you'd like to. Here's one reason why you shouldn't waste time on worry. Worry is absolutely unreasonable. It is unreasonable to waste time on worry. When I first moved to the Midwest, you know what my worry was? Going through a tornado. Because you see, I watched the movie Twister, and you're like, I don't ever want to be in that. That's not exciting, okay? Cows flying all over the place, home's gone. You know, in an earthquake, my home's still there, right? I might be in the door sill, nothing else is standing around me, but I'm still there. It's not blown down the street to somebody else's house. So I was terrified, that these tornadoes are going to come because the clouds roll in and storms just cook real quick, real fast. So in my mind, it just became unreasonable. I was thinking, okay, one day I'm going to be in class or I'm walking to class in Missouri and a tornado's going to come and it's going to suck me off the ground and it's going to chuck me down the street to, Jim Bob's house. And good thing he's got an above ground pool because I just landed in it. And when I surface to the water, here comes a boxcar from a train going to land right on top of me. You see how unreasonable worry is? It is unreasonable. And you say, well, come on. That's crazy, Jim. You're out of your mind. Yeah, every time you go to the ocean because you're scared to death of that water, you're thinking it's going to be an episode of Jaws when you go in. Worry is unreasonable, God says. That's why Jesus says, why would you worry? He says it's unreasonable to worry because you have been created in God's image. And if God's willing to feed the animals that you don't ever think about taking care of out in the woods of the San Bernardino National Forest, how much more is God going to take care of you? Because you're the only creature on the planet that he ever said, you've been created in my image. So Jesus says it's unreasonable to worry. Stop worrying about tomorrow. Think about today. It's unreasonable to go that far with worry. Another thing is about worry, it's just not helpful. Worry's never helped me one bit. When I worry about something, that I can't change, it's never helped it change. When I worry about something that I can change, it's never moved me to change it. So worry has absolutely never been helpful for me, and it's never been helpful for you. In fact, some people will say this: you are worrying yourself sick, because worry is never helpful. In fact, it's the stress about sharks in the ocean that's going to kill you, not the sharks. It's you stressing about it. See, worry does something significant to our body physically. I mean, we feel ill. We have to take aspirin. We're so worried about this. We're so worried about what people are going to think. We never get help for the problems that we have, and we just make them even worse because we're worried about them. Worry's never been helpful. Jesus said it, right? He said, the birds are taken care of. They're helped by God. You worrying that you're not going to be helped by God doesn't actually get you helped by God. Stop worrying about it. God's going to take care of you. Worry is unnecessary, God says. It's unnecessary. Because we're worried at times, our minds go just absolutely haywire because maybe we've been criticized. So then worry seeps in and we think, well, not only does this person not like me, but the entire world doesn't like me. And Jesus says, this is unnecessary. Because you know what God says? He says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. You may be worried about your job, or you may be worried about your children going to school. You know what God says in the Bible? He says, I'm your shepherd. And even though you walk through the darkest valley, I'm going to go with you through it. You're still going to go through it, but I'm going to be there every single step of the way. So God says, don't waste time on worry. Solomon says, don't waste time on worry. You can't control life, but don't sit about worrying about how you can't control life. You know what he says? Enjoy your life now. You don't want to waste time on worry? Well, enjoy the goodness of life now. That's how you deal with worry. Enjoy what you have before you. In Ecclesiastes 7-8, it says, light is sweet and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all, but let them remember the days of darkness, for there will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. Now, this is something you see Solomon say all the time in Ecclesiastes. It's like meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. And he sounds like an old crank. But he's not. You know what he's saying? He's saying instead of meaningless, maybe you translate it vapor. Life is a vapor. He's saying you're here one moment and then you're gone. And you know what his solution to that is? He says, enjoy the life that you have right now. Enjoy the life that you have before you. Verse 8 says, don't worry about how many years you'll live. Enjoy what you have right now presently. You can't worry about when you're going to die or how you're going to die. What you can think about is, you know what? I'm living right now. So I'm going to enjoy the life that I've been given. I'm going to rejoice right now. You know what Solomon says to those of you young? Because he's going to talk to two groups of people. He's going to talk to young people and he's going to talk to older people. And to young people, you know what he says? He says, live it up. He says, live it up. Yep, just like that. Live it up. Verse 9 of Ecclesiastes 11 says, you who are young, be happy while you're young. Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see. But know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. There's two commands here if you didn't see them. The first command is this. You can underline it if you want. Be happy. God commands you to be happy. Especially those of you who are young, be happy. And the second command he says is this. Follow the ways of your heart. Be happy and follow the ways of your heart. Live it up. Don't wait until this or that to enjoy your life. We have a tendency to do this. Say, you know, I'll finally be happy if I get a car. I'll finally be happy if I get a job. I'll finally be happy if I get into school. I'll finally be happy if this or that happens. No, Solomon says, don't you wait to be happy. Be happy right now. Live it up while you're young. And some of you are saying, oh, Jim, oh, Solomon, please do not tell my young person to live it up, to follow the desires of their heart. Listen. Here's two things that we need to get clear. First thing is this. The Bible never ever says desire is sinful. Never once. In fact, God says, I will give you the desires of your heart. The object of the desire is what's at stake. God never says desire is a wrong thing. We desire lots of things. We desire to be reasonably happy. We desire to be able to work hard and enjoy our job. We desire to have a family, to have children, to have a spouse. We desire to have meaningful relationships. We desire to enjoy good food. We desire to be active. Those are not bad things. Desire is not a sinful thing. Notice the disclaimer that Solomon gives. He says, live it up while you're young, but understand this. The choices you make come before God's judgment. So Solomon never says, live it up and do whatever you please. He says, live it up, but understand God will bring everything into judgment. You know what he says for those who are older? Because as you and I get old, you know what happens? We don't live it up as much. You know why it's hard for some people when they get older to have joy? It's not all people, but some people, as you get older, it's hard to have joy. You know why? Because we carry too much regret. You know what Solomon would say? Before the dust settles, and that means you, before you become dust, get rid of regret. It doesn't matter whether you're 16 or you're 95, get rid of regret. You want to live a full life. You want to live an enjoyable life. Remember Jesus, he promised us, he says, the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I come to give you life and give it to the full. If you want to live a full life, you know what God would say? Get rid of all the regret. That's what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 1 to 7. He goes through this whole thing about how you're going to get older, how the grinders are going to be gone. In other words, he's saying the teeth are going to be gone. The hair's going to look like apple blossoms. You're going to be scared to walk down the street one day. He says, hey, before that happens, get rid of regret. Choose to live your best life now. Choose to live your life to the full. That's what he wants for every person, whether you're young or you're old. And the only way I know to do that is exactly the advice Solomon gives, which is the last saying, fear God and keep his commandments. This is the only way to experience the full life that Jesus offers, is to fear God and keep his commandments. Look at what he says in Ecclesiastes 12, 13 to 14. Now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or it's evil. So Solomon says, everything's been heard now. I've told you everything from chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes all the way to the end of chapter 12 of these last two verses. Everything has been heard. And here's what you've heard me say to you. Life is short. Good things will happen in your life. Bad things will happen in your life. You're not going to take all the things that you earned in life, the achievements, the money that you have. You're not going to be able to taste food for all of your life. You're not going to be able to have drink for all your life. Life is short. And he says, while you have life, enjoy it. And the best way to enjoy life is fear God and keep his commands. He says that's what the whole purpose of life is. Now, when he says fear God, he's not talking about you and I walking around constantly cowering in fear as if God is up there constantly looking for you to slip up and he's going to zap you the moment you do. He's going to take away blessing the moment that you get everything wrong. No. Fear God means I actually am serious about God. And I acknowledge that God is supreme. To fear God means I'm saying, you know what, God? You're my Father in heaven, and you know far more than what I know. You're my Father in heaven, and I know that you know best for me. And even at times when I read the Bible and some of these commands are confusing to me, or even at times when I read the Bible and I know I need to do this and it's extremely hard for me to do it, I want to do this because I know you know the best for me. And I know it doesn't make sense right now to me, but I'm going to do it anyways because you know everything and you created me to be in your image. And sometimes I'm not going to get it right. Sometimes I'm going to fail. But I know that you know what's best and that you love me best and you are going to embrace me and bring me back close to you. And God's saying that's what life is all about. Solomon says this is a good thing because he says to be a human being, is to know who God is. To really be the best human that we can be in the world, to really experience what God really desires for us as a human being, is to know him and to live for him. He says this is the best thing you can do. You want to deal with worry in your life? You're worried sick. You want to deal with how you can't control life? You really want to experience a life where you're willing to take bold, calculated risk? Then you have to be willing to say, you know what, God, you're the boss of me. I'm going to live for you. I'm going to keep your commandments. I'm going to do my best every single day to walk with you, because I know that you will make my path straight. That doesn't mean there won't be any obstacles in my path, because sometimes, God, we're going to go through a wall together. Sometimes we're just going to jump that fence. But I know that if I walk with you, I'm going to be on the right path. And it's the only path to be. You know, God shows great risk in sending his son. You know, the highest medal of honor in Canada is the Victoria Cross. It's like the Medal of Honor in the United States. And in the history of Canada honoring soldiers with this medal, a great many of them received it after death because they died while falling on grenades. One soldier, particularly in World War II, was moved with his fellow soldiers up to the front lines. And as they were at the front lines, the enemies were now close enough that they were throwing their grenades over there. And this one soldier kept picking them up, grabbing them, and throwing them back. And then one landed in a place that he was not going to be able to grab in time. And so he told them grenade, he yelled grenade, and to take cover, and he threw himself on it, and he died instantly. And later he was awarded, his family was awarded the Victoria Cross. See, they're honored, and those friends understand that honor because of one who was willing to lay down his life for them. And the thing is, we see that as a great honor because of someone doing that for their friends. But notice, there's another cross that we know of. It's not the Victoria Cross, it's the cross of Calvary. And God sent his son to lay down his life, not just for his friends, but for his enemies. For everybody to have an opportunity to have God in their life. If Jesus was willing to take the risk and walk those steps to the hills of Calvary, how much more can you and I take risk in our life to follow him? To look at our watch, to look at our phone, and it says 11:46, and we don't say, you know what, I'll take this risk tomorrow. But to realize that God's saying, no, I want you to live now. I want you to do that now. If Jesus could lay down and have the risk of nails being driven into his wrist, how much more can you and I take the risk? And say, you know what? I don't care what people think. I'm going to go get help at Celebrate Recovery. I don't care what people think. I'm going to take my kid to this new program for them that we have advertised here in your bulletins. You know, I don't care what people think about my family. I don't care if they think my family is dysfunctional. I'm bringing my teen to Celebrate Recovery on Thursday nights. You know, I don't care what people think at my work. I'm just going to say, you know what, this is what I believe. And I want to be strong about my faith. I don't care that, you know what, other families have problems. I'm going to do my best to try to work on mine. I'm not going to be ashamed that, you know what, I have some marriage problems, and I'm going to try to do my best, and my spouse is going to try to do their best so that we can do the best we can to have a good marriage. If Jesus can take all of those risks, how much more can we? And we can know that God is with us every step of the way. And God, that's what we want. Lord, we don't want to live on the sidelines. We don't want to watch others have you move in their life. Lord, we want to take the risk in our own life and say, God, we're going to step out. And we're going to ask you to walk with us. For some, maybe it's stepping out and finally getting real and say, you know what, I need to change some things in my life. I'm addicted to this or that, and I need help. for some to step out and say, you know what? I've been lonely. And I know that the solution is not trapping myself in my home every day after work, not interacting with anybody. I'm going to come down on a Wednesday night to Bible study. I'm at least going to get to know one other person. For some of us, Lord, it's just a matter of saying, you know what, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to try to make it here every week so that, God, you can work in my life, so that I can learn more about you and I can trust you more. So, Lord, I pray that you would help us to be bold for you. I pray that you'd help us to be wise. And I thank you for sending Jesus to die for us, Lord. I don't deserve it, but I praise you for that gift. I can never earn it. And it's in your Son's name. Amen. Well, God bless you guys. If you need prayer for anything, come on down. We love to pray for you. Have a great day as you live boldly for God.